It's going live.
Okay.
Just let me know when you see.
Oh, it looks like it is there, so I think April's probably live.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And it is Friday, April 18th. And we are jumping in this budget letter so we can get it done out the door. I think I sent it rather late last night, but it is posted on our website. So it has the additions that we talked about. 300,000 for the 2 fish and wildlife positions for Act 181. 4 million restored over the House's recommendation, back to the governor's recommendation of 9.25 million for PCD remediation and follow-up testing in schools, and 175,000 increase to base for an A&R attorney as they help defend Vermont, particularly Vermont's climate laws. So altogether it brings us to 6.6 million. Oh, and I added that line about pushing out the deadline.
What's that?
Oh, it's at the bottom of the chart, just says additionally.
Yes. I think this reflects everything we talked about.
Under 2.0. Yeah. And Terry, you're with us virtually, right? I mean, Senator Williams. Senator Williams, did we lose you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're here, great.
I'm operating left-handed, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I have a bandwidth problem, so if I don't have my screen on, I can.
Okay, well, we can see you and hear you
Okay.
just fine, so.
Okay.
You just need it on if we're gonna vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's what I would say about this.
Yeah,
So we're just getting the stuff.
Yes, and it's still welcome.
Oh, okay. The bulk of the money that we're asking for is for the PCBs, which is related to our jurisdiction, but is also related to the jurisdiction of the Education Committee and the jurisdiction of the Health and Welfare Committee. So I think that one has an asterisk. I mean, I think it's fine that we put it on our list, it seems good, but I also think, it has an asterisk because it sort of covers a bunch of areas. And
Do you want to pull it out from the total?
no, it would be good.
Oh, we got 22.6, but also.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is
Yeah.
that, it looks like we're asking for a lot more than I feel like we kind of are. And and we're also just looking at this in one section of the budget, not the broader budget, where, if we're looking at the broader budget, we might make different decisions as we'll have to do. But in here, I think that we've done a good job of trying to hone in on the most important things in this moment.
I agree.
I think that's actually the way to consider pulling out the 4 million, putting it in a different box, saying we share jurisdiction, but but as well. Because these smaller amounts that we have are in terms of operation of critical.
Yeah. Here, the 4, and so one reason that it, thinking about it being in our jurisdiction, I mean, it is overseen by, Matt Chapman.
Yeah, it should be an A&R.
Yeah, and it's going into the environmental contingency fund, and anyway, I could put an asterisk next to it and have little explanations, recognize that this is of interest to other jurisdictions, and.
I don't know that we necessarily have to call it out per se, I just think that.
Got it.
In my thinking about this, I see that as a different kind of Cause I think in past years, it's been on the education committee's list and not on this committee's list. But it's, you know, this is a weird year, so it's maybe always.
Yeah,
Okay, for
2.0.
And sorry to make, what were the, are there any? What changes are?
Oh, so
what we
the
faced
last-
yesterday?
Yeah, so the last 3 rows of that chart are new.
So that's based on our conversation.
Based on our conversation.
initially.
And then below the chart, there's a sentence added, additionally request this deadline extended.
Okay,
Yeah. Yep, so the fish and wildlife positions. PCB remediation
and not river positions,
and
not the river positions, took them out.
right, yeah, right, the DEC. 500.
Which they suggested.
And it's lower amount too, because we had 500,000 in there and we lowered it to 300.
This is true.
We were just talking, Senator back
Plus
about
175 back.
how the 4 million is kind of an cross jurisdictional, that it's like a bunch of committees sort of have their
Right,
fingers on that 4
PCB.
million, but we're putting it in our letter, because the money actually goes to A&R.
okay.
Even though it's kind of a education, and kind of a healthcare thing, both. But that would, as it says, restore it to what was in the governor's recommended budget.
You will walk the committee, the appropriations committee through this, some of this they might not, that would understand without some explanation.
That is my intent.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, I think you'd be well positioned to do that.
Yes.
Yes. For sure. Before we.
And well, has asked this, but S-29, is there a hope for that bill, or?
So I was just having an email exchange with Senator Perchlik about that yesterday. I mean, I did raise it in committee because there's the different sections, or the way we're talking about different sections of the budget, there's a space for other bills. You knowing that there are gonna be things that yet pass that may have appropriations associated with them, so. There was only one that was in there so far, and so I alerted them to say, you know, that there may be another one coming in S-29, and so. Anyway, I think what in this most recent email exchange that I've had with Senator Perchlik, I'm going to say, let's. If we can, we're gonna try to reserve out the most amount of money that the amount of money that we had in for it, which I don't think it would go up from there. So if we can save that out, that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay, any thoughts or comments? Senator Beck or Senator Lane, something?
I'll move. I'll move to approve the budget for us. Version 2.0.
Any further discussion? I think we're just gonna straw vote, so all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and opposed, Senator Williams. Oh, you're voting no? Okay, good to know, thank you.
I sent everybody a letter this morning replying to Ann's letter, so if anybody wants
Okay.
to know why.
Okay, good to know, thank you.
Okay,
All right, maybe I should, well, I can. What I may do is put the names of those who voted aye on the letter. Does that sound reasonable? Just so it's clear who it is from.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that is it for now. On this. And we are gonna move on to the budget letter, not the budget letter, I'm sorry, the fiscal note for H41. And for that, we have a couple folks from JFO. Welcome.
Good morning. For the record, James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office. Also joined by Ted Barnett today from the Joint Fiscal Office. Ted has done a lot of work on the clean water surcharge in the past, so this is going to focus on clean water surcharge, and if we have questions there that we want to discuss, we'll be on hand for those. So,
Before you jump in, do we, I don't know that we have this.
oh,
Posted.
okay, so I have the link open.
It's now on our website.
It is.
Yeah, if you refresh.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, great, okay, there it is. Super, I think we're good.
Okay,
All right,
great.
thank you.
So this is the fiscal note for the as passed by the House version of H 481. I know there have been, a handful of potential amendments to the bill that's passed in committee, but this represents the version that was passed out of the House. As passed by the House, there are essentially kind of 4 buckets of fiscal impact to the state that come about as a result of H 481. And you can see those in the 4 bullet points of their fiscal impact here on page 1. The first is that authorization of municipal impact fee assessments for municipally operated stormwater systems. I know that the terminology for municipal impact fee might change in the bill that's being contemplated here in committee. But the magnitude of that effect would really depend on the extent to which towns in the future decide to assume full legal responsibility for their stormwater systems. And so the magnitude of that effect isn't really possible to estimate at this time. But we'll go into a bit more detail about that further down. Second category of fiscal impact would be the repeal of the clean water surcharge rate decrease, which was set to go into place in 2027. In 27, under current law, the clean water surcharge rate was set to be reduced from 0.22% to 0.04%. And in addition to keeping the clean water surcharge rate at its current amount, this bill would also remove the 2039 sunset of the clean water surcharge. And so those first 2 buckets kind of represent fiscal impacts to the state in the form of revenue, either foregone revenue or maintenance of current revenue collection levels. And then these second 2 pertain more to appropriations. So the third bullet point here refers to amending the municipal stormwater implementation program, allowing that program to make grants to municipalities for the purpose of municipally owned residential stormwater system upgrades under the requirements of the 3-acre permit rule. And additionally, the bill would direct the Clean Water Board to recommend $5 million in fiscal year 2027 to support that work. The bill also directs the Clean Water Board to prioritize $1 million annually, as currently passed by the House, from the Clean Water Fund to municipally owned stormwater systems, municipal development. So those are changes to how the Clean Water Board would be required to recommend funding going forward.
Yes, good.
I think we've gotten this in testimony, but what is the total amount in that fund that they distribute each year, do you know?
For the municipal stormwater implementation programs?
No, the clean water fund in general.
The clean water, it does vary depending on the year based on PTT intake, and the other funding sources that go into it. I don't have the number in front of me for the most recent fiscal year, unfortunately.
Okay,
Perhaps I can call on Ted in the gallery over there to give the most recent
sure,
number for us.
always good to phone a friend.
Yeah.
Ted Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office, I can absolutely pull it up. So there's a distinction between appropriations that are made kind of from the base revenues, so what would come from the clean water surcharge. When you're thinking, so in the clean water fund, right, there are 3 kind of sources of your base appropriations. You have the clean water surcharge, you have the 6% of meals and rooms taxes and test sheets from bottle deposits. And so total revenue from those 3 pieces is in fiscal year 26, the what was recommended through GovRec was $28.9 million, and appropriated from that was $24.8 million. There are other there's kind of some reserved and allocated funding that they pulled forward from ARPA, so it gets a little complicated, but wanted to talk at kind of that level between those 2 pieces.
So it's roughly 25 million range. You said 24.5 to 28, and those are the 2 numbers.
Yeah, so the 28 is revenue, and then the 25 approximately is appropriations. However, there also, that's for revenues, there's also money that comes from the capital bill. And so when you go all the way and include all of those appropriations, the total appropriations are proposed for fiscal year 26 is 45.8 million. So there's a
Oh.
piece from revenues, there's a piece from the capital bill, and then that together is 45 million.
Okay, I
Yep,
was trying to get a sense of how much, what percentage a million is.
exactly.
Yeah, so like is that a lot or not a lot compared to the rest of the month?
And I can forward to the committee, the Clean Water Fund does a fantastic job of presenting kind of budget and policy documents, and I can send their two kind of pieces of information that I look at all the time, and I can
Okay.
forward that to the committee. I think it's just helpful.
That would be great,
Yeah.
thank you.
If
I may, yeah.
Yeah.
For the record, my name
Okay.
is Gianna Petito, grant supervisor with the Clean Water Initiative Program. I can hand these out. This is fiscal year 26. And it also breaks down on this page over the last 10 years, the breakdown between the Clean Water Fund revenue and the capital bill going into the budget.
I love that.
So if that's helpful for
Okay.
that question. Let me know.
Yes, thank you.
I have 5 of these.
Amazing.
There's 4 of you
Right.
today.
All right.
Thank you.
Maybe you won't.
So keep that too.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then, so the fourth then kind of fiscal impact category here is minor, and this is the cost of the proposed study committee on the creation of regional stormwater utility districts. It would cost approximately $6,000 for per diem expense reimbursements for study commission members across fiscal years 26 and 27. That's expected to be coverable by existing ANR space. There's no specific appropriation made for that study committee in the bill that's currently passed by the House. So with that being said, we can dive into each of those 4 categories in a little bit more detail if the committee would like. So talking a little bit about section 1, that's permitting timelines and those municipal impact fee assessments. So section 1 of the bill, in addition to enabling those municipal impact fee assessments for municipalities that take full legal ownership of their stormwater system, would also extend the deadline by which owners of property subject to that 3-acre permit, 3-acre impervious surface permit, have to achieve compliance. For those in the Lake Champlain or Lake Memphremagog watersheds, or any stormwater impaired watershed, that deadline would be pushed out from October 1st, 23 to October 1st, 28. And then the deadline for all other permittees or folks subject to that permit would be extended from 2023 to 2038. Or no later than 5 years after a stormwater specific wasteload allocation is established for that watershed, whatever occurs first. JFO spoke with ANR about this, and this is not expected to significantly affect their permit fee revenues. It certainly affects the timing of when the revenues might be received, but the fiscal impact of these deadline extensions isn't perceived to be significant to ANR's operating cost collections or permit fee collections from this permit program. I mentioned earlier that the fiscal impact of the municipal impact fee assessments really depends on the extent to which it incents future municipality adoption of full legal control of their stormwater systems. So in the event that a municipality does assume full legal responsibility over their stormwater system, there is certain permit revenue that they would no longer pay to ANR, which they would otherwise pay. So those permits fall into 4 categories. I think the committee has heard a good bit about them from DEC and ANR in their testimony so far, but that's the municipal roads general permit and the MS4 permit. And so currently each of those permits yields annual operating fee revenue for ANR that's paid by those permit holders. In the event that a municipality takes full legal control over their stormwater system, privately owned impervious surface is subtracted from the methodology that's used to calculate that operating fee, which represents a reduction in future permit fees received by ANR. But again, the magnitude of that change would really depend on how many new municipalities in the future might go down this route.
I'm trying to understand that. So if the municipality takes over or a group of homeowners, say there are 5, just to make it easy, 5 homes, and they would each have to pay a separate permit fee if the municipality doesn't take over the full thing. But if the municipality does, then only the municipality would have to pay, and therefore it's one fee versus 5 fees, is that how? I know that's oversimplified, but
So the way I understand it, in the context of MS4, for example, the fee that's paid by the permit holder, right, and that this is municipal, so the fee paid by the municipality is calculated on a $10 per acre basis for impervious surface. I'm not quite sure of like the policy reasons why this is, but when the municipality assumes full legal responsibility, the $10 per acre is no longer assessed on privately owned impervious surface, and so it reduces the amount of impervious surface onto which that $10 per acre fee is assessed.
but only for MS4.
Well, that's in
Oh.
the case of MS4. That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Interesting. So it kind of reduces the amount of impervious surface onto which these kind of per acre or, under the roads permit. These per unit impervious surface fees are assessed, and so would reduce fee revenue taken on that way. There are other policy reasons why municipal adoption might be desirable from A&R's point of view. Not that they're the decision maker in that case. So it represents foregone revenue. It may also have other benefits such as, enhanced municipal maintenance of those stormwater systems, et cetera. More efficient removal pollutants, that kind of thing. But from a strictly dollars and cents point of view, this could represent foregone fee revenue to the agency in the future. So that's kind of the first bucket of revenue impacts to the state. The second is this removal of the clean water surcharge, sunset repeal, and the maintenance of the clean water surcharge at its existing rate of 0.22%. So this was originally set at 0.2% of the value, the transfer value for non-principal residences, and 0.2% of the transfer value above $100,000 principal residence transfers. Back in 2024, Act 181 increased that transfer value exemption threshold from 100,000 to 200,000 and increased the surcharge rate up to 0.22%. And so this H41, as passed by the House, would maintain that current rate of 0.22%. As I mentioned earlier, it would also sunset the sunset that's currently set to take place in 2039. And the revenue impacts, I'll tell you about the revenue impacts of the change made to 181 are still unclear, just given the recency of that change, right? That was August 1st, 2024 that went into effect. But according to the Department of Taxes, the surcharge generated approximately $6.9 million for the first 8 months of fiscal year 2025, just to give you a sense of the scale of revenue
The
generated.
total surcharge, not just the 0.2% change.
That's correct. That's the clean water surcharge is in entirety generated 6.9 through those first 8 months of FY25.
Thank you.
Well,
Pages are different.
Oh, they're all grown up.
They're all grown up.
and so that carries us through our revenue fiscal impacts and takes us into those final two impacts to appropriations and how the state makes appropriations for the restoration activities under these two grant programs. So funding priorities for the Developed Lands Implementation Program and Municipal Stormwater Implementation Program. So section 6 of H41 would amend the Developed Lands Implementation Program. In addition to that program's existing support for 3-acre stormwater permitting compliance, this section would allow to provide financial assistance for 3-acre rural permit renewals, the activities required for those renewals. And that section would also add language that states that the Municipal Stormwater Implementation Program can provide financial assistance to municipalities who need to come in compliance with permits for impervious surface of 3 acres or more for residential subdivision stormwater systems for which they assume full legal responsibility. So my understanding of this provision is that it clarifies that this program is able to provide financial support for this category of compliance activity under the current permit. Moving on, section 7 amends the statutory requirements that govern the Clean Water Board's prioritization recommendations, right? So the Clean Water Board recommends how funds from the clean water budget are allocated according to the instructions they receive in statute. This section would amend those instructions in statute and require the board to recommend at least $1 million per year for the municipal stormwater implementation program, specifically for the purpose of supporting compliance with 3-acre permitting a stormwater permit requirements. And then section 8 would direct the Clean Water Board to recommend $5 million from the Clean Water Fund to the municipal stormwater implementation program just in fiscal year 27. For the additional program support opportunities that are identified in section 6, that municipal stormwater implementation program. So you got the $1 million per annum, being directed towards the develop plans initiative going forward, and $5 million going towards the implementation program just in fiscal year 27. And then finally, I alluded to this earlier, the bill establishes a study committee on the creation of regional stormwater utility districts. It would be a 7-member committee composed of various representatives identified in the bill. The expense reimbursement costs and per diem costs for this committee would total to about $6,000, which is expected to come out of A&R space budget, just given the small amount. In fact, there's no specific appropriation need for it in this bill. The committee would cease to exist on March 1st, 2027, after reporting on its recommendations to the General Assembly. And that takes us to the end of our fiscal note here. Happy to answer any questions from anybody.
Thank you. This is really good. Thank you. Pretty great. I think that I need to talk about that second bullet, the clean water surcharge sunset repeal. I think I need to go over that one more time. I apologize for the confusion, but
Is there anything in particular that would be helpful to review, or just kind of that section of the fiscal in general?
I think I just in general, I think I just need it one more time.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of there are various kind of revenue sources that go into the clean water budget. One of them is this clean water surcharge on the value of property transfers, right? That's the property transfer tax, the PTT. The clean water surcharge applies as it's currently set at 0.22%, right? To properties that are above that value exemption threshold, right? So there's this threshold below which properties are not taxed, or at least the clean water surcharge isn't applied, right? And the value above a certain amount of the clean water surcharge is applied.
I think I'm understanding now. I think the part that was confusing to me that I hadn't processed before was that which is making the connection that Act 181 increased the surcharge. And so I was like, wait, I don't remember seeing an increase in the surcharge here, and thus my confusion. But I think I'm there now, unless other folks would like to go over that again. Yes.
And to cover that fiscal office, a little bit of context. So the exemption threshold only applies to principal residences. So for secondary residences, commercial properties, it's the clean water surcharge applies to the full value of the transfer. Yep.
Gotcha.
I think the Spark Notes version of this is that it maintains status quo as it currently exists. And yeah, it maintains status quo as it currently exists and removes that. Seemingly distant for now, but coming up on us quickly, I'm sure. Sunset 2039.
Okay, I think I'm feeling good about all of it. Any other questions folks have? Okay. Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. Yeah. So need to process that for a little bit longer. Okay, all right, and we are fortunate enough to have Mr. Bright and Ms. Tito here again. Thank you for coming back, joining us for a second day. Another day. So keeping on the theme of the stormwater bill, let's jump back into just getting some questions answered about how things are working, particularly relative to the questions that have come up. And would love to, if other members of the community have follow-up questions that they have, we can start there, but otherwise I may jump in.
Go for it.
Okay. So thinking about like the conversation that we had yesterday, you know, I feel like what I'm trying to do is see if there are any places that are worth further exploration or you know, the potential for change moving on into the future. And just so you, I mean, the way I'm talking about it is thinking about how we're it seems like for some folks, things are moving, but for other folks, things are we're having a lot of conflicts. And so how can we, in the delayed timeline that we have, how can we set ourselves up to be in a better place you know, in 2028? You know, kicking out that deadline. So what do we want to have accomplished in 3 years? And what questions can the study committee be tackling that might be useful to you? So my initial list of here are things that maybe the study committee could look at was an attempt to get at that. And it's been helpful to hear from you all how you are already navigating those things. And so I just want to start with a broad question of, is there anything on your radars that would be useful to do between now and 2038 that would set us up to be in a better place?
Happy to start. For the record, Kevin Berth, Stormwater Program Manager. What comes to mind is not something that necessarily needs to change in the bill, but I think through testimony and just our work in rolling out 3-acre requirements certainly highlights, you know, residential subdivisions that are incorporated in terms of homeowners association or other legal entity. You know, we know how many there are, we know which ones they are. I think, you know, given that we have the potential for an extended deadline, it will give us more time to directly engage further. I mean, we have been engaged in many of them, but engage a little bit further in terms of identifying what feasibility constraints there are. While the feasibility, you know, the list of feasibility criteria set forth, you know, first through Act 64 and then in rule and general permit, doesn't explicitly say, oh, if there's no association, we can just pay the impact fee. But if there is no association and there is only one viable place to provide treatment that happens to be at the low point on one individual, you know, adjacent to one individual homeowner, I don't want to call it takings of the property, but oh, this might be the best location. You know, that could very well be, you know, considered in the sense that feasibility, that might not be the best approach, given that it could preclude somebody's use of their property as it existed before. There are, you know, there are residential and commercial developments where there's a place to site a stormwater management system that makes sense, that might not be in somebody's backyard or in a particular location that would be impeding somebody's use of the property. But I think having some of those conversations with some of these more difficult sites might be helpful. And I think identify, you know, what level of engineering, you know, analysis needs to take place. If some level of well, even if there is an engineer involved, maybe their EFA is really touching upon some of these points as opposed to diving, you know, spending a lot of money diving deep into something that ultimately might not see the end goal of citing that practice. But I talked yesterday a little bit about, you know, the use of offsets. And we did explicitly say that, you know, sites can't just jump to an offset. We really, you know, and this was included in the response to comments on general permit 9050. We can't just say, we're not going to do anything here. We're not going to treat our impervious, we're going to go find an offset. But if there is some feasibility analysis that can identify constraints that generally fit within the criteria of precluding, the original use of the property, or something along those lines, it could open the door for better, more creative solutions. That's contingent, though, I think, on, municipal engagement. And hopefully there is, some incentive, maybe not for all municipalities, but some to look at other ways to satisfy the 3 acre requirements without impeding, these private property owners' use of their property, or the complexities associated with no association and that sort of thing. So I think that kind of rises up to the top for me. I'm sure there's a lot of other things the study committee can look into. But that, I think we could really focus on some more outreach and engagement.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, and I don't know where this would go in the bill, but given what you just said and what we have heard, it seems to me that we could put some language in the bill. Not in the bill, in the study committee. I don't think you need to study that, what you just said, frankly. And it seems to me that putting in a requirement that, A&R shall provide technical assistance and support to homeowners and municipalities in order to meet the provisions of the 3 acre rule. Michael O'Grady can figure this out. It's 3 acre rule that is the most equitable and least cost option, or some language that basically you get to the best solution with the least disruption and the least cost and the most fair. And I know that's hard to balance all 3 of those things. Sometimes being fair costs more money. We see that in education finance all the time. But if we create some kind of language that says that, and I'm sure you're already doing this to a large extent, but having that in the law sometimes will provide a little bit more comfort to the people who feel caught in this system and feel caught in this process. And to me, that seems just kind of like a no-brainer, not something we need to study. Because it does seem like, you said, I think it was you who said it yesterday, where there could be this solution for a neighborhood where if you all go in and help engineer something, that they use different parts of the neighborhood and figure out, and this is not my work, but figure out where to place things that involve a larger piece of the neighborhood than just the 3 acres, that you can often come to a solution that's even better. And I didn't, until you said that yesterday, I didn't know that was an option. And I wonder if a lot of the people who are caught up in this don't know that that's an option too.
Yeah, and that would be an I don't wanna allude to the fact that we would be expanding the jurisdictional requirements to the other homes up gradient. We would just be, there might be an opportunity for, if a town was involved, to say, let's see if we can capture that targeted impervious within the municipal right of way. Some of it might be within that 3 acre site boundary, and some might be contributing, also owned by the town of Richmond. So, not necessarily changing who's on the hook for the 3 acre, but it's really important that the municipal participation happen to that would really be the only way for some other path to be successful.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think there's a difference between and I don't wanna speak for the municipalities, and Josh is standing right there, but there's a difference, I think, what I think is scaring them is the full legal responsibility. And there's a difference between full legal responsibility and cooperation and participation, and sort of how do we get that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not obviously an attorney, but, this would be more for, Michael Grady. But the town of Richmond already owns and controls their right of way, I would think. So I don't, by implementing something within that area, that might not change a whole lot, and they were taking full legal responsibility of well, several permits, solely under their existing conditions, so might not be that much of a shift, with the exception of, maintaining something that was improved and needs to be maintained going forward. And I do appreciate the, trying to memorialize our assistance. We are doing that. Sometimes we hit a wall where the person we're trying to help isn't really engaged for us to help. But we're certainly willing. I think when it comes to cost effectiveness, that becomes a little difficult because we're not necessarily experts in construction bidding and all of those things, but if we presented with the information and some options, I think we could certainly provide support. And see, we do this on new development projects where an engineer is stuck. They'll come in and sit down with us ahead of submitting an application. And sometimes we have ideas, or we've seen something on another project that an engineer, we've got some really creative stormwater engineers out there that we tend to look to provide creative solutions that can often be applied on other projects.
Yeah.
If I can add to that as well, I will say one benefit of another benefit of the timeline extension is that willingness to come and speak to DEC. I think just hearing from the funding side, some concern about talking to the regulatory folks because they're past date and they're past due, and that in and of itself is really beneficial to bringing people to the table. And when you're thinking about these creative solutions, there could be other ways to ask about sharing case studies with those creative engineers, with the audiences that are thinking about that, spreading it, helping the engineers communicate with each other about ways that they've implemented this rule creatively. Or exploring that in the study committee, how at a municipal level, where are the creative solutions that have been found or could be found. So there might be ways to do that on a communication standpoint, to explore as well.
Yeah. It just seems to me that we don't wanna wait for a study committee to put. I think the message, based on everything I've heard from both the people who are impacted and then your agency and the municipalities, is that there's this, people are kind of got their hackles up, and just if we can help find something to get people to take a deep breath and be like, okay, we're all trying to find a good solution and work together, and that might be easier. Maybe that's very naive of me, but I feel like there's got to be something that's in this bill now, and then we study something later, other stuff later, but that is saying, A&R is here to help.
Yeah, well, and I want to build off of that. One of the things I heard you say, and there was having some kind of a feasibility analysis, and is that the kind of thing? It seems like that would be the kind of thing that would happen now, but I could also picture, if you're running into a situation where it's looking really, there's you're trying to avoid a taking, you're trying to, there's the homeowners association doesn't exist, or, there's some real barriers there to moving forward. having a feasibility analysis that could say, all right, well, so these are the steps you go through. And if you get to the bottom and there's not a great path forward, then you can, do the offset. I mean, maybe that you already have that in your, in your process already, but making that explicit somehow, or making it clear in the law that this is a pathway that, or an option, you can request a feasibility, analysis. Does that seem like that would be useful? Can you, what do you think about that idea? And actually, I'll say one other thing about it. One of the things we did hear from folks is that it felt like there was a lack of guidelines or what the process could be if XYZ were to happen, like just some guidance to have it. So one of the things I contemplated suggesting was creating a guidance document. And it sounds like maybe there's potentially some overlap between a feasibility analysis and guidelines.
We do have about feasibility. How to go about completing an engineering feasibility analysis. Could be expanded to include some of those additional thoughts. But I think we do still, it's not explicit where it says that we can go to an offset, but it's implied. If you go through the feasibility analysis and you find that you can't do something, and cost isn't a consideration right now. We would want somebody to go to an offset. But we also don't want to lose opportunities for where it's viable. There's impervious out there that can be treated. That's the best place to do it. Then it should be done.
So, one possibility is that we ask you to make explicit the implicit process of how do you land at the option of an offset.
Yeah, I do think we have enough language and feasibility and, some deference, as the regulatory entity to apply that, in terms of including somebody from the use of their property. This comes up that, the Act 250 requires X amount of parking spaces. You can't put something there because you need parking spaces. That's a little different, but in the same scenario, you've got a residential where it's kind of the same in the sense that you're potentially taking something away from somebody. And it could be something that's not necessarily on their property. They just happen to be the landowner at the bottom of the hill. And it depends, if it's 200 yards away. Maybe it's not an issue, or it's 100 yards away, but if it's at the edge of your property line, that might be different. So they're all a little, every site's different. That's the difficult piece, but I think we can be engaged. If there was a wish to expand feasibility, we have that in statute, rule, and general permit. So I'm not quite sure as to, maybe this for Michael already, but how you would tackle that, or to change something or add something. I think we have the deference and ability to, if somebody was to present us with an engineering feasibility analysis in that light, I think we can consider it and make a decision.
But having a pathway to some guidelines around what would lead to an offset that would not run afoul with any of the requirements for the TMDL. Is that right?
As long as that, we already have language that would, an offset has to, there has to be modeling and pollutant loading calculations that show an equivalent reduction will be met. So you've got a 3-acre site, we'll be doing an estimate as to what is expected if full treatment was met here. And then showing that it would be met there. There would be, I just want to add one more thing, it doesn't Having an offset doesn't preclude development from having a valid permit. And that's where the legal responsibility comes in, and that's where, whether it be the municipality, whether a regional utility, that piece still exists, the permit does not go away.
Just how you're meeting that,
Right.
right? Yes, good.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to me that we don't want the end result for all these sites to be an offset,
Yeah.
because that makes it more complicated and maybe less. I don't know, but I guess I would just reiterate that if there's a way to find solutions that are outside of the, the box of the 3 acres and outside of the box of the, yeah, like I was saying before, and it sounds like that is possible as long, but I'm not sure people know that that's an option. And also that knowing that there might be some funding that could help lower the cost for people too. I'm not sure also that people seem to know that.
And just, the offset can't be a wetland restoration or a floodplain restoration project, you have to be treating impervious from developed lands.
Yeah.
Is there potential in this space to request a plain language summary of what feasibility is and what offset is, and some 1 or 2 examples that have been contemplated or not? Is that a space that could be done on a shorter timeline than the study committee, and provide that clearer communications to the lay audience that's not the engineering folks to understand and maybe lower the fear and maybe increase engagement?
That's certainly possible.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like user-friendly communications to lay people. I mean. Like this kind of language and colors and, you go, first you do this and then you do, and maybe you have this stuff, I don't know, I haven't seen all of your, and it just seems like everybody's freaked out, and I would be freaked out if I'd gotten one of those letters. I would be totally freaked out, so how do we unfreak people out? There's enough stuff to be really freaked out about right now. We don't want them to be scared of A&R and this, so.
Well, and I would add to one of the things that came up over and over again in testimony was, I don't understand how my site matters.
Right.
What impact can I possibly be having on Lake Champlain? And, I wonder about, and it feels a little prescriptive to put this in statute, but thinking about, if we're asking, for there to be better notification of properties, that it makes sense to me anyway, that as a part of that, to include information that's like, here's why your site matters, here's the science, and explanation of a little bit of background as to why you should do this. You know what I mean? Like have the why baked into it. But yes, go ahead.
Does this process with a landowner or association usually start after the first phone call will it just kind of walk and talk on the site?
No. We would, if somebody requested that we visit the site, certainly can, there's probably many sites that we have been to. It really depends, but we're going to the Rutland Fair next Friday. They come up against some complications with existing infrastructure and cost, and we've heard a lot about there, so. There's a real engaged need to go down and watch the site on.
Does that not happen as much as it might because of just time and professional?
No, I don't think that's the issue.
So do you suggest it, or do you wait to be asked, or?
Wait to be asked. I think, we did have quite a while where there was the permit payment assistance funding. So there was a path that a permittee that was notified could engage with an engineer, and that cost was covered. So, having an engineer consultant, going out and doing some of that initial work is often very helpful because they can come in and identify, they confirm what the impervious is, they look at the drainage system, what can be done, before, are there wetlands there? And then often the engineers or consultants will then get in touch with us and say, this is what I found. You mind, can we meet and talk through this? I've got, or could look at an aerial image. If time is an issue or constraint, sometimes you can do a desktop review and get to some things, but sometimes boots on the ground. It's the way to go.
I was trying to find it, I'm not gonna be able to find it quickly enough, but while we were talking, we're being emailed by people about this bill. And I just had a question about, and we may have already gone over this, but I just refreshed my memory for projects that are that impact what are affordable housing defined as forever affordable. Is there financial assistance to help with those projects?
Would you like me
That
to?
are specific to, like the green schools and those kinds of, and fairs, are they treated as a separate category?
No, I'll take a moment to kind of give you an overview where what we funded to date. And so you've heard the permit of human assistance, pretty much all the funding that has supported 3 acre to date has been the ARPA money that is now swapped out to general fund. A lot of it is swapped out to general fund, and the Lake Champlain Basin program money, which has supported the green schools. So all of that money that's come through the legislature got parsed out to certain user types as a way to prioritize.
Yeah.
So the schools got a big chunk trying to fully fund them. The manufactured housing community as listed, but not sort of like all definitions of affordable housing, just very specifically manufactured housing communities. So there's like 18 to 20 on that list. And then the agricultural fairs. Everyone else, other than federal and state properties and businesses that couldn't self-certify as a small business, we opened up just permitting assistance, the permit obtainment assistance program, because that was ARPA, we had to close it at the end of last year, September. And so now all of that's everything's encumbered, and now we're talking about what's the next frontier to help everyone through the construction phase, because people are making generally good progress through the permitting phase. So that's where the board is shifting to looking at, with the limited dollars, more of a financing model. Open to really anyone, on the municipal funding line, municipally managed permits, whether it's adopted or because it's for municipal sites, and then on the developed land side for private sites. And so that could include affordable housing, it could include gravel pits, it could include really everyone that's in the private site. All of that money is contemplating getting pooled into a financing model. That's not yet developed. So seeing what that would look like on the ground will take some time. We also need to see how that funding opportunity should evolve with the regionalization opportunity. So one of the study committee questions is, how can a regional utility access state level assistance? Because we want to make sure that whatever we build up isn't just targeting individuals, but could also provide that funding to a regional entity. They could be an eligible recipient at some point. So no, right now, no, there's no other specific carve out.
Because I just, I'm reiterating the comment I made yesterday, I'm just very concerned about the pressures this is putting on our housing, just in general, whether it's a neighborhood development, or in this case, a affordable housing apartment complex or something. And just the more we can do to help housing stay affordable, the better, especially given what the housing risk is. So we all just got an email about it. So.
We wouldn't necessarily know, unless we're told that something could look from imagery or just as a site developable permit, we might not know that it's affordable housing, or it's been developed for a certain purpose. But I think, if there's a need for a particular site, or where they're potentially more challenged, I think that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, no, well, then maybe we should,
Well, just, we generally know commercial versus residential, but is a condo development owned by a commercial company that provides housing, residential or commercial? Some of the lines get a little blurry as you look at a lot of these sites, and even the table that we provided,
right,
you can say residential, but some of them might be commercial.
And Senator Hardy, in addition to that, what has been missing in the 3 acre space on the funding side is any legislative priorities on user types for funding. So other than I think the agricultural fairs being a legislative priority, the rest have sort of been agency led, identified sites. And so as we move to a financing model, we're certainly contemplating sort of tranches of people who would come in the door, and whether that subsidy, loan subsidy or forgiveness will be higher for certain user groups and needs. There's nothing in statute that requires that right now. So if there is interest in pointing to prioritize user groups or prioritize ownership models, that would be something you could think about.
yeah, okay. I mean, I definitely think we need to prioritize housing and affordable housing to get whatever limited funding that we have, because. And I know that that would put pressure on other groups if we do that, and that I'm sure that there's, all the other groups will have their reasons, but right now we're in a housing crisis, and if we can't prioritize housing, at the very least, and certainly affordable housing. So potentially put into that financial assistance program, some language about prioritizing housing, neighborhoods, affordable housing. Yeah. To be, get financial assistance, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, there's still some other questions that I know we talked about this yesterday, but that are still not as clear as I want them to be. So like one of the things that I would have wanted or that I'm still contemplating is asking folks to come up with a recommendation on a path for compliance for neighborhoods in which not all the homeowners are willing to form an HOA. Do you think that could be covered in some kind of a guideline around offsets?
I think it could provide, a guideline could provide. Maybe plain language as to what options are available. It doesn't exempt the current requirement.
Right.
So I think we would be identifying that, there needs to be a legal entity. But I think a guideline document, some type of guidance, and even, an opportunity to, maybe even hold some event, or whether it's on through Zoom or some online meeting where we can take more general questions and engage on solutions. Open it to engineers, open it to whomever. I think that could be another useful opportunity.
Okay. Okay, I feel like I am seeing that maybe there's some of the things that I have questions about, maybe we can package them into, and ask of you all to put together some plain language, guidelines or explanations about options people have, what happens if you run into, X, Y, Z obstacles, which I think that sounds like that could be helpful, particularly for the public. Okay, yes.
Can I just stop for a second?
Yeah.
So for
Michael, I think we have you on the agenda for next week.
Right,
Which is fine, I just thought it was, I ran over it because I thought it was today based upon the email that I was sent.
it's not today.
No, the email said April 25th, Michael, sorry.
Okay,
That's okay.
Alright, we didn't wanna waste our legislative council attorney's
I
time.
appreciate that very much.
That's
Points to be early. Thank you, folks.
For sure. Alright. Any other questions that folks have? For staff since they're here? Okay. Okay,
I have one more thought, Chair.
yes, please,
You asked at the very beginning of this, sort of what would be helpful or
yes.
And it's one thing I think about, there are really some helpful things inside the bill we've already talked about, one of them being that sort of explicit baseline commitment telling the board to assign 1 million to the municipal stormwater line. And I know you've heard some different testimony on that matter and definitely defer to the board prioritization and then obviously the legislature. I will flag that the timeline that you put on that is only 2 budget cycles away, so that really will only effectively put 2 million, you may be cognizant of that as well. So that floor, seeing how that tends to unfold in the budgeting cycle. We've certainly, within the last budgeting cycle, heard feedback that we need more funding in the developed lands and the municipal stormwater. And ultimately, the tiering ran the strongest and said the distribution reflects the tiering, and we're gonna stick with that. So having that carve out is particularly helpful if you'd like to really commit some funding to this. For as long as you're comfortable with and see feasible.
Where is that specifically in the bill?
It's something that we talked about, I think it was going to be in today's newest version, from Michael Grady. Because we were gonna sunset that 1 million annually.
Okay, so it's not in here.
It's not in there yet, not the sunset of the 1 million.
And we were gonna sunset it in two years and you were concerned that that's
Yeah.
too soon.
And if it's fiscal year 28, we're starting the fiscal year 27 budget this summer. So that would be,
That's true, that's just.
Yeah.
and this year it would just be the 5 million, so it would just be 1 year of 1 million.
That raises a difficult question for me, because like if we bump it out, if you assign money to it further, like if you let the sunset for that 1 million be further out, but the deadline for completing it is 28, then sort of it feels like those things should match. And which makes me wonder about like, is 28 the right deadline? And I'm a little hesitant to push it much further out, but
Well, where does it, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the actual language so we can time. The deadline gets pushed to
The deadline to submit a notice of intent, so that's part of
October 28th, so that's the FY 29.
yeah, that's true.
Year. So even if we just do another year, that lines up with the 28 deadline.
Right, and this
Okay.
funding can support construction, which can get to 5 years
Okay.
after it applies.
Yeah.
And
Oh, so
Right.
I'm sorry, so it could support construction up to 5 years after?
Yeah, so when we issue a permit, when somebody gets a full, complete approved design, they're issued a permit and that design needs to be implemented within the 5-year permit terms. They have 5 years beyond.
Okay,
And they have to submit by 2028, so it's possible they get their permit in 2028 and say. They're not, they might not be constructing.
right, so maybe it makes sense to push it out if fiscal year 28 ends in 29, no, that's not right. Then
28.
it ends in 28, so pushing it up to 32 would be 28 to 33, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could do 32 as compromise, that's 4 years after the.
That works for me.
But what are the deadlines for overall, the deadline is 38? For
So-
the TMGL?
So there's 2 TMDLs, so, well, 2 TMDLs, there's the Memphis Magog and Lakeshore Plain TMDL, which is the deadline for the 3 acre permit is now gonna be 2028, but for the eastern side of the state, the requirement is 2038,
I'm sorry.
and southern, thank you.
Longer.
And then, how is the eastern side of the state defined?
Watershed.
It's watershed, water, it's not defined, it's Connecticut River,
So
so basically all the other drainages, with the exception of stormwater repair, like my.
It's like who, what?
Eastern side of the state that drains into Memphremagog is. Yeah.
Is included now.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
okay.
I guess we can get this latitude. Yeah, whatever drains into the Connecticut River. Okay. Think we're at a good stopping place for now. Thank you. We're gonna, yes. Checking back in with our, you're down.
Anything else that we need to discuss through our leadership or otherwise? There's this something.
I can forward you the one that we just got about affordable housing, so you know where that is.
If it's helpful, yeah, certainly.
If you're not able to tell the difference between an affordable housing and anything else. I feel. Thank you both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, right. All right, so we are gonna transition to a different bill quickly while we hear from Ms. Wright from AOT. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So we're switching to H 125, and then we were able to get Michael Grady for 10:30.
So this will be quick, for the record, I'm Andrea Wright, I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at the Agency of Transportation. So just quickly on H 125. My computer's been waiting for me to get out, but this went to sleep. V-Trans definitely understand, that the goal of the bill is to provide you with make good decisions. We definitely understand that, and to look at the geographic distribution. That's definitely the way that we operate and look to have as much data as possible so that we have those informed policy decisions. You've already heard from PSD, I think earlier this week, you heard from A&R Secretary yesterday. So much of what I would say is right in line with what they both said. There's a lot of this data in here in H 125 that is already provided. There's PSC's annual energy report. You heard a little bit yesterday from Jane and Secretary Moore about the measuring and assessing progress tool that's required by the Global Warming Solutions Act. There's also the past legislation with Act 154, the Environmental Justice Act. So definitely some overlap with other things that are going on. The transportation committees also require annual reporting of progress on electric vehicle supply equipment, EVSE. And that's towards our federal plan requirements as well as state goals that are in statute. We also have reporting on electric vehicle transitions through our incentive programs and what we've achieved with those. So I can go through quickly the indicators that are listed that I think have a transportation nexus and where we stand in a couple minutes. The sixth one there, gasoline and diesel transportation fuels data, that's tax fuel sales data, so that's available. The number and location of retail gasoline and diesel outlets, that would not be an agency of transportation. It may be that the agency of tags, the rates and measures program could provide data on that. They inspect and regulate those locations. So not quite sure on that one. That's not really an agency of transportation item. Number 8 is progress in electric vehicle supply equipment, both fast charging and level 2. So I mentioned per the T-bill and per statute, we are required to do annual reporting on our progress towards our national electric vehicle infrastructure plan and the state goals, which are a little bit different from each other. We're also required to report on progress towards last year. We were required to report on the progress of both electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging in line with the comprehensive energy plan and the climate action plan. That's not in statute, but we did provide that last year, so we are able to provide that sort of data. Let's see, vehicle registration, this is DMV data, of course, Agency of Natural Resources. DEC works with DMV and they put out quarterly reports on that data, so definitely something that is already compiled. And then just moving on to sort of what else the report should include. The regional distribution, that is also required of us right now through the legislation, through statute. For EV charging, we are required to provide a map where we are with charging infrastructure rollout. I don't know if you also want to hear from ACCD. They are responsible for more of the workplace, community, multi-unit dwelling, lower level. They do some fast charging as well. And I guess I'll just an identification of existing reports and requirements that may support reporting on relevant indicators. Again, through statute 19 VSA 2901 through 2907, we are required to report on the EVSE and the EV incentives. And so just wanted to mention that part of the planning that we did for our EVSE locations per the federal requirements, we had to decide and plan on where we would put these locations, fast charging locations. And so part of course, we were looking at highway traffic volumes and walkability to different services, because it does take a little longer to charge electric than filling up with gasoline. But we also were looking at some environmental justice factors in where multi-unit housing units are, so they might not have access to home charging. It's important for them to be able to access fast charging near where they live. Let's see, we are working right now to identify metrics for Act 154, the environmental benefits spending report. So that really gets to the consideration of equity, that number 4. And then I guess I'll just really close quickly just by saying that you know, all of this is sort of that second part of what else should be included. It's just sort of the way our agencies work. We definitely have a continuous mindset improvement. We all work together through the interagency advisory board. I think Director Lazorchak spoke to that yesterday. So we're always looking at what more we should be collecting for data to make better policy decisions. So really, in a nutshell, we can provide this data. A lot of it already is provided in a different manner. So I will leave it at that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Yes, Mr.
I have a note here from some definitely somewhere along the line, this bill number 6. Asking, would that include, is that by gallons? And then the second question is, can we track costs as well? Cost per gallon.
I believe that would definitely be better answered by tax. Probably like Jared Duval could probably answer that too, because he does a lot of that compilation. But I believe yes to both of those. Not
So we got that, is that would be okay?
I believe so.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions from this room? Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to take a 5-minute break while we get back on track here, and we'll start at 10:30 again with H41, since we have our ledge council. Okay.
Can you
And
shut the sound off on the iPad?
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay, 30.
It's 10:30, yeah.
I saw you had an agenda.
Michael.
Okay, can you put the sound back on when you're ready to start? Sound back on?
Okay. I think we are on now, so this is Senate Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a break. And we are joined by the Legislative Council, and we have a new draft of H 41. We just had some discussion about that. I imagine we'll probably want to make some further changes to the draft. But to start us out, Mr. Grady, could you lead us through the changes that are here?
Sure, this is Michael Gray with Legislative Council. DJ 4/16/2025, draft number 2.1 with a 1:09 PM timestamp. First change is on page 2.
Okay.
Where you're clarifying in that language about municipality assuming responsibility that they have assumed or are going to assume when they assumes or has assumed.
Yep.
Okay, next change, page 8. Line 5. This is that language that in the currently the grant program, they're gonna be a financing program. Whether there was clarity about this program is available to all, and not just those that are going to be assuming board legal responsibility. So this program also shall be available to a municipality to provide one. That work for you?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Next change, page 11. Section 9. This is a future section that will repeal the $1 million minimum funding to the municipal stormwater implementation program. And that goes into effect October 2028.
Oh, okay, so I had not clearly understood how this was working, but I think I understand now, because I was just seeing this as striking out the 1 million annually, but that still exists.
You still
On
want
page
money,
10.
right, you still want money to go to the program,
Right.
right, and until 2028. There's going to be at least $1 million that goes to that program.
Right, it's dedicated.
Right, and then in section 9, which goes into effect in 2028, the minimum million is struck, but there's still money that will go to the program. As there currently is, there's currently money going to this program from the Clean Water Fund. You're just taking away the minimum $1 million.
Right, and so this is a new section that had not existed
Correct.
prior, and the effective date on this later is.
October 2028.
We should talk about something that we did. So
Would you like me to move that to 32?
yes. Unless there's objections.
Okay. And should I proceed with the changes?
Yes.
Next change 13. This is adding a representative of the RPCs to the sentence.
Great.
And then the next change is 16. Which is the effective dates.
Yep, which will bump up to 2032.
Yep.
Okay. So. Based on the conversation that we. I suppose all of the conversations that we've had so far, they're further. Where I want to go now is if there are further changes that we want to see to this draft. And it seemed like there were a couple things that came up. I have a list here for you, it's not, I'm guessing you also have a list.
I do, I mean, sort of, I think the main. One of the main things is, and I know you heard part of this discussion, is somewhere putting in a prioritization for housing, especially affordable housing, to receive financial assistance. So that the agency knows that that's a legislative priority. And I don't know if it goes with the $1 million or $5 million for just a general priority, but making sure that to the extent possible, that funding,
And how long would that priority last for?
I don't know, we didn't talk about but just my concerns are that this whole thing is putting pressure on the cost of housing, affordability of housing, time on where housing basis.
So I have a couple of thoughts, if it's generally short term, adding it to that section law section where the 5 million is appropriated. And just saying when the agency is awarding funds from both the municipal grant program and the development plans program, they shall get priority to applicants who are. Then that's my second question. Who are the applicants that get priority? Are they just those in residential subdivisions? Or are those in residential subdivisions that are affordable housing? And the third question, how do you define affordable housing?
That's always the rub, but it's not just residential subdivisions, because I think there are some like apartment buildings, or
Well, just
senior housing places and things like that that are.
property subject to the 3-acre permit that is used for residential housing.
Yeah. And I don't know, I mean, we've had this debate down the hall a bunch of times about how do we define affordable housing. There's a federal definition. There are various state definitions that are different from each other in statute. So I'm not sure that this committee wants to go down that rabbit hole, but you're right.
If you wanted it to be affordable housing, it's a priority. If it's just 3-acre properties with residential housing that are subject to the, then it's just about who's about residential housing.
Yeah.
I could see, well, I could see moving just residential to the top, it's like everybody needs help, all residences need help at this point, but affordable housing more. Right, so how we list them above housing in general.
So did you hear that affordable housing is subject to this and not getting assistance?
We have not heard that in direct testimony, but we have been. We just were all emailed something by somebody who is, and what we heard from A&R was that they have no idea. They just know who the permit builder is. They don't know if it's commercial or housing or affordable housing or whatever.
Because they did address the, what the
Manufactured housing.
manufactured housing communities. And then the question is how many of the other residential parcels are affordable housing? And they don't know that.
That's what we just heard from them, from A&R.
Which I understand.
Yeah. I think they know that it's residential. But it also could be an apartment building that is listed as commercial because it's all rental, and then they just think it's commercial and they don't know that it's residential.
Well, if it's an apartment building that's listed as commercial, the permittee is going to be the owner,
The developer,
right?
and they can be developing multiple types of properties some are commercial, and some are
They're
residential.
they're not developing, so if they're developing new, then they are being permitted under the.
Right, no, have developed.
Right.
Right,
But the permit isn't being transferred to the renters of the commercial.
Correct,
Right.
but the owner or the developer owner is a permit holder. And they may be a developer that develops all different types of properties. So A&R wouldn't necessarily know that this particular property is an affordable housing.
And you wanna give that developer a priority?
Well, what I wanna do is give housing a priority so that we don't inadvertently increase the the pressures on the cost of housing in the state, so maybe we just say vaguely and say housing and then, but then that just leaves A&R into the position where they have to figure it out.
Can I think about this a little bit? I wanna.
Yes.
well, I want to raise a related issue.
Or do we go down?
Which is that, like, which tranche of money are we talking about? And in terms of prioritization, it seems to me that, we would want to put that in the priorities for the developed lands implementation program.
Yes.
Not necessarily all, like, all of the clean water funds in general.
No, it wouldn't just be all the clean water funds. I think the two that are right now specifically dedicated to these types of permits are available, I should say, for these types of permits are to develop lands, and that's for anyone to apply for that.
Right.
Or the municipal implementation one, which the municipality applies to support those parcels within its boundaries.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, I wonder if we could say for the municipal one that. If it's primarily for the municipality, right, but that if you could prioritize ones where the municipality is partnering, or is a co-permittee.
Sure, when a municipality is applying as a co-permittee or having assumed responsibility for a 3-acre permit with residential housing, the agency shall give that municipality some priority in the award.
Yeah, right, because we do want to incentivize municipalities to take on these, this work, so. Making that float to the top of the list, I think would be helpful.
Okay.
Sorry, can you just, to prioritize those projects that have a municipal partner?
So the municipal
Right.
stormwater implementation program is. I think I'm making an assumption here, but that it's awarded to municipalities. And so if there is a project in which the municipality is a co-permittee with residents, with a subdivision or whatnot, that project should float to the top of it, aside from, just being a municipality.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
And that's under the municipal, and then, Michael, you were suggesting.
Oh, developed lands available to everyone, it doesn't have to go through the municipality.
Right, so if that was prioritized to be residential projects as well.
So who I'd really like to talk to about this is Neil.
Okay.
Conlon, because he used to be in charge of, part of the program that. Provided financial systems, and just wanna shake his brain a little bit about how to do that.
Okay. Great.
If we're gonna go down this path, we also wanna make sure that it's truly residential,
Yeah. What do you mean?
not second homes and not short-term. Because residential, I suppose, short-term rental is residential, make sure, we wanna make sure this is where it gets complicated, where it's gonna get complicated, you're trying to parse that out, but.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
it could be ones with homestead declaration, because then the second homes and short-term rentals don't have the homestead declaration, but then that makes it even more complicated for A&R to manage.
The apartments don't have that homestead declaration.
They have the rental
Rebate.
rebate credit.
I mean, I wonder if you all would have just jumped straight to staff back there. My guess is you would need permission to get that data from tax about homestead declarations or rental rebate data.
Gian Tito,
Yeah.
Clean Water Initiative Program, Grant Supervisor. I've not operated with that type of specific definition before. I know that Healthy Homes as a program has had to work with several different programs to get information to be able to distribute their affordable septic system upgrades. There could be a way to contemplate. The other thing to flag for you is like, what does priority mean? And it could be as simple as encouraging, you know, as part of the priorities to score up ones that are used as a residential facility, because there's all those other factors, right? Ability to pay, readiness, et cetera, that can be playable as well.
And those are things you're already considering.
Already considering, right? And so it's how much do you want to put into the statute? The housing is a priority clearly for the committee, so how specific are?
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that you just add it to your list of things you consider, is that what you're suggesting?
I'm sorry, I'm saying I'm not particularly an expert in who we would need to engage with if you go down the line of very specifically articulating what type of housing usage.
Sure.
But if residences in general are a priority, you could give that as a sort of guiding post.
I mean, we could just say primary residences,
Mhm.
and then that is generic enough to say, we don't mean second homes, we don't mean Airbnbs or whatever. And we don't have to define affordable housing, because if there are all those other criterias, ability to pay is one of them, so,
Right, it's already in
yeah.
that works for me.
Yeah. But it's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay, yeah.
Will that still require access to tax information? I don't know. Good question.
Yeah, and I mean, the only way that you could just have a self-certification that says this is my primary residence, but which is essentially what the homestead declaration is, it's self-certified, so.
Yeah. Let's keep going at 6 months in. Water. Okay,
Okay. Great.
well, that was fun.
I know you would ask to think more about it if you have more thoughts about it. Later, I would love to.
Easter surprise.
Okay, other things, on the list.
We were gonna talk about this, that you had a bunch of things that shared.
Yes, well, before we get to the study committee, we talked about. This might just, I don't know where this would live, but having, like just directing A&R to come up with a plain language, lay accessible document that would explain, guidelines, options when folks run into difficulties,
For
for owners of 3-acre covered sites.
have you seen their websites?
I've seen some ones, I'm not sure if I've seen one of them. But you're talking about in terms of like the guidance already exists.
They have I would say more than a handful of them at this point, don't you?
What was it? I'm sorry.
How many 3-acre websites do you have?
We have, well, we have one really three, I mean, we have the stormwater program site that has 3 acre information, we're looking for a list. We're just,
Okay,
If I can
Yes,
add to
go
that,
ahead.
I think a gap that might be missing as council is this, particularly in a space that's heavily technical, we're missing something language around understanding what goes into a feasibility and determining whether it's feasible, as well as, sort of case study sharing of creative solutions, so that
yeah, you
particularly
don't
is missing.
have, so it's, you just said you need an engineering analysis, you didn't really talk about what's necessary underneath that. Okay, got it.
Why is this happening? Oh, that was
A very heated necklace, just.
So you're gonna say something? Just getting back to the conversation that we were having before about, and I know this is not something you're gonna like laugh, Michael, but the conversation we were having before about making sure that when A&R is working, that A&R is providing technical assistance and support to homeowners to help them find like creative solutions to the stormwater problems, because it sounds to me like a lot of people that we've heard from don't think the A&R is there to help, and trying to make it clear that that's part of A&R's job, is to try to help find a feasible solution.
Is this for all stormwater or just 3 acre?
3 acre.
Okay.
Yeah. We also, as part of that, talked about how there is a process, or at the end of a feasibility study, it's possible that someone can determine that the best option is an offset, but that is sort of implied and it's not explicit. So somehow making it explicit, maybe it's in case studies, maybe it's in a set of guidelines, but how can or might one arrive at the idea that that an offset is the right solution, and knowing that that is not the preferred solution. That's not where we want people to. If at all possible. And this for me is also related to guidance around the need for guidance around what to do if a homeowners association doesn't exist, or if not all the homeowners are willing to form an HOA. And guidance around if there are upstream properties that are flowing into the property. So just making it clear for folks what the scope of possibilities are, including thinking about obstacles. Potential obstacles.
Yeah, I would be a little more vague than that, because
Oh, sure.
that is, if we prescribe it too much,
Yeah.
then there could be a situation that we didn't get testimony on, that is a problem, so something more about that A&R shall provide technical assistance and support to find feasible solutions for
Guidance for potential obstacles.
yeah,
Just leave it sort of vague.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have, this often begs the question of what is feasible mean?
I know. Mhm.
What is what?
What is feasible mean? Because it's a combination of almost anything that's possible, to spend enough money. Yeah, I'm sure. So. But at a certain point, because it's not.
Or maybe not practical,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
So how do we use that?
What do you think?
They could try all of that.
No, I mean, from this draft.
So you want available, practical, and affordable.
Yeah,
Yeah, or of course, then.
yeah.
Michael's like, yeah, good luck.
Ways that typically seen in bills practically.
Yeah.
I know I drafted a guide book on stormwater law for citizens and. Can't remember what law it didn't come from.
So this exists.
Yeah, I think it will definitely need an update.
It's a big side.
Yeah.
Oh, if there's a.
The Secretary of Natural Resources shall publish as a handbook a suite of practical and cost-effective best management practices for the control of stormwater runoff, reduction of adverse water quality effects from construction, development, and expansion of impervious surface. Best managed practices shall address activities to control, mitigate, or eliminate. Superintendent standard shall be advisory, shall not be mandatory. That's it. But I can build off of that kind of model.
Well, if it already exists, I'm looking at their website right now. Like,
So it's 2016.
do you have this guidebook that Mike's referring to?
That sounds a little bit like the low impact development green infrastructure guidebook that may have been developed at one point in time.
Yeah, I think it is.
Which is certainly outside of the stormwater management manual that's applicable to regulatory projects.
But I can riff off of this.
Maybe it's an update now, if that already exists and as it's relevant to.
And I think you probably want something that's
Okay.
new and improved.
Okay. Put that in there too. New and improved,
Like a new and affordable.
practical. Oh my gosh. This is impossible.
Yeah, right. There's another note that I have here, which I don't know quite what to do with this. Because I just feel torn about it. On the one hand, I would love to bake into the notification that needs to go to all property owners to say that together with the notification, that there will be an explanation about data about the impact of residential properties on Lake Champlain and the importance of some kind of information explaining the science of why this is impactful, so that people understand the why. That also, I'm feeling torn about it because that also feels really prescriptive and so.
Well,
Yeah.
having received the notice,
Yeah.
I thought there was something that was in that notice about why it was required.
Oh, okay. Interesting, so that already is being done. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
if I may, you could say it many different ways, and sometimes not, the message might not necessarily get to the audience, depending on their particular understanding of watershed science. You can, but we can certainly, as we would probably do anyway, in any new notifications, include similar language.
Okay. Okay, so I'm willing to let that one go for now. Other things on people's list for further attentions.
Somebody said the study thing.
We did, so. There is one thing that I do want to add to the study committee, which is investigate how other states address stormwater. From residential and commercial properties. Feels like that would still be valuable and not super heavy lift. No,
No, it's just, I just, for. Like Ohio, right? Their stormwater districts are like multiple counties, right? Well, Colorado, it's baked into their water district because they have a lot of need to control water. DC is just DC, right? That's like that discrete entity. And then most of them are otherwise through their county or township governments. Which we don't have.
Hello.
So the question is, if they're gonna report back on how other states do it, are they reporting back on how other states do it? In a way other than through county government, or?
I want them to report back that we need county government in Vermont.
well, we could add that in there, make a recommendation as to the role that the county might play in. Facilitating. Or, you know, taking on orphan permits, or, I don't know that I wanna say that specifically.
So ridiculous that we just keep like have a government model in our state that actually functions well at the regional level.
I guess maybe I shouldn't say orphan permit specifically, but just the role that counties might play. In the stormwater space.
Yeah, and I think that. I don't think we want the committee to report back on what other states do, but for the committee to. See if there are lessons learned from how other states manage stormwater, manage stormwater.
I'd like him to recommend a model.
Yeah.
Recommend something.
And we just keep creating new regional entity districts so that we have like an ever overlapping. Regional government system in our state that is expensive and confusing and not efficient at all. Sorry, I'm gonna get on my little wide, not regional government Belfast rant.
So I will generate something for you on that. We'll probably have to be a better process to get where you want to be.
Are we, so we are talking about their study.
The study committee, yeah, I know you had some other things.
What, did you go through your list?
Well, my list is, I feel like my list has changed. Because some of the things I think are being addressed, this maybe just not clear to homeowners. Cause I had on the list, recommended path for compliance. For neighborhoods in which not all the homeowners are willing to form an HOA.
Well, when I just wrote down the lessons learned from other states, it's how they're going to, how they regulate stormwater when subject to a TMDL. Mechanisms for assigning liability and how to address orphan systems if orphan systems exist in those jurisdictions.
That would be great. I had one about urban systems. Yeah, I think that works. There's this other issue about the uncovered upstream properties.
Yeah, that's definitely, I'll include that, that's separate from the orphan systems, so.
Yes, agreed. And separate from that as well, if there's any lessons learned about how MS4 permits. That's not very great. I guess I wonder if there's anything still there in the space of the overlap or the potential overlap between the municipal roads general permit and the 3-acre sites, but I'm not sure that there's. Like it would be great to have one permit that covered the municipal, like all the functions of keeping roads stable in the municipal general permit. And trying to do some stormwater functions through that, which I realize is not the purpose. But maybe in the case of municipal roads general permits in MS4 communities, is there a way to expand that? I think it'd be interesting if there was recommendations about how to incorporate stormwater into municipal roads general permit in a way that is not overly burdensome.
The agency is already incorporated into the MS4, the stormwater impaired TMDL. And I think the municipal roads permit has a little bit more opportunity for interface with the MS4 than some of the other permits. Like if the municipality needs to get the multi-sector general permit for industrial facilities, that's not the same thing as a municipal roads or an MS4. To kind of a different animal. So and then just the operating permits in general are different animals as well. Like when they build their new school or they build their new municipal building, they're probably going to need to get an operating permit. And that's entirely different from MS4 and municipal roads general permit. So I think there's opportunity, so you could have them like recommend or evaluate how to streamline municipal stormwater permitting under different umbrellas or something like that. But I don't think it's gonna bring everything underneath one umbrella.
Fair enough, but I do like the idea of trying to streamline these permits. If there's opportunity to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that they're doing.
Right, yeah.
Are you done with the oversight? One more.
Yeah, you go.
So I know that some people in the room are gonna kind of not like this, but next year is supposed to be a year that there's a sort of check-in with our TMDL. I mean, and I know we have multiple TMDLs, but I think there's a check-in, at least on the Lake Champlain one. And adding something about whether or not there could be by reviewing the sort of balance that is in the TMDL between sectors, whether or not there's a more cost-effective and.
That's not part of this committee, that's part of the check-in.
Yeah, so the check-in is with A&R. I mean, how does the check-in work?
Well, have you seen the Clean Water Initiative report where
Probably, I think we have, but
they have consolidated the multiple reporting requirements that you gave them for the multiple water quality programs into one report.
Okay.
And I would just say as part of the Clean Water Initiative annual report that they shall propose if it's feasible to reallocate the load allocations for residential developed lands in order to more equitably assess or achieve something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's not just reallocating that one thing, but whether or not there is a better balance given where we're at right now with each of the programs. Now, I don't know how much to say that, but.
when you say balance, you mean?
Each sector is assigned a certain reduction that they have to achieve. And I don't think it's been looked at since 2016.
So,
So EPA approved the TNDL and the implementation plan in 2018.
2018. And next year is an automatic kind of some kind of check-in with, and who knows, I mean, I'm a little reluctant to say this just because the federal government is melting down right now, and that's who they have to check in with. So I don't know what this might. But having that as something that somebody's looking at, I'm sure they're looking at it anyway, but it might be helpful.
Okay.
yeah, it'd be good to know what their charge is with that. We're checking already, see if.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can have secretary up here to talk about it, but
I don't know what you mean, but EPA gives them a report card
yeah.
and says this is how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the check-in that you mean?
Well, my understanding is next year there's some kind of,
Or is the evaluation of whether or not there needs to be an additional implementation measures?
right, I guess that's what I mean, and whether or not there's a way to implement different measures that would still meet the TFDL.
Sure. I think there's definitely different measures, of whether they're built on top of the initial measures. So I'll write it and you all can
And we can ask
advise.
maybe or somebody, right, whether it's a can of worms we don't wanna open or not. I mean, it just
Yeah.
seems like if there's already this thing happening.
What's the space to shift? Okay, yes.
So, I want to be sure I can, we really have prioritization here, really. We have, because one of the studies we had has been, you know, there's 600 and some odd potential sites, and try to figure out which sites would give us the most benefit of dividend for which ones that are producing the highest possible skill. I don't have to from which ones we want to have first, and then possibly even stagger the timeline. Just in the study, this is stagger the timeline so that everything's not due at once, but maybe we figure out a way to prioritize which ones are going to give us the greatest reduction in phosphorus load, and then prioritize those. And possibly even, you know, whether we want to stagger the dates out. And I don't know what you mean about that. Be interested in your thoughts there
Yeah,
against the wall there.
sure. I'd love to hear what Kevin has thoughts on too. So prioritization on the funding side versus the permitting side looks a little bit different, but I would say that given, in terms of permitting, getting them through the permitting thing, since there's about 75% of them all kind of staggered in their progress right now and extending the deadline to 2028. I think de facto, in terms of them all coming at once, there's a staggering that's happening, and it's not something really driven by the agency. It's really driven by the sites and the readiness to come forward, the willingness, the ability to do that. And so there's some piece there in terms of like who holds like how much can we prioritize that? Certainly when there's at-need sites, like Kevin has testified to, the department is there ready and willing to assist and give them that assistance. And then on the funding side, it's really a question of who receives the funds. We're kind of starting to shift our focus on the construction side, right? And how does the committee want to prioritize funding? And again, it part of it is time crunch. The folks that got a permit 3 years ago, like whether or not they're housing, whether or not they're high needs, like they may be ready to do things on the ground. So the complexity of like how to build a prioritization schema for who gets the money can be tough based on different user groups, different needs, levels of readiness, but it's yeah.
And we also think about the permanent side, you need to.
Yeah, and the
whether
permanent
that should
side.
be stagnant in some way as well as some pushed back that are less, not that we don't want to do them, but. So now focus on the highest priority first. Maybe this is just not practical for us in all this way.
Yeah, it sounds good, but I think there is this sort of natural staggering that's occurring. Because of all the factors that Gianna mentioned. If we were to just set different deadlines, people where sites permittees would simply wait. And not be engaged, even if they're engaged in some respect now. And maybe moving at a slower pace than somebody else. It keeps them all moving forward. As opposed to, staggering. Hey, we're gonna get these 100 sites that we really want in the door, doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna come in the door. And then we end up pushing out other sites that might be ready. Might have already engaged with an engineer. Or received funding.
I guess I don't want to beat this horse, but I'm just going, part of what I'm thinking about, just pulls apart a little bit. There's going to be a crunch when everything is due and you're supposed to be permitting done and it's not going to be enough money. With everything coming relatively speaking at once within the course of several years. And so I'm just wondering whether it makes sense, given that, to make sure that we stagger where maybe it's already happened, and she's suggesting that's already happening in a way that's working. But so that there's actually enough money to help people as theirs comes due. Because there's not nearly enough money in the system to what we need to do. So I don't know if it's any way to include that as part of the analysis. I'm saying makes sense to people, not.
In terms of retaining funds for folks who are sort of behind the times or getting caught up, I think that's one of the benefits of extending the timeline that you're committing funds to those lines. Because then that kind of gives a runway of, hey, we're putting some money in now, we're gonna launch this program and more is gonna get plugged in.
Okay.
And so I think that creates a little bit of that opportunity on the funding side.
Yeah, we think you're.
Yeah, anything else on people's radars to include? In this study? Yeah, if we have.
All of the stormwater is great.
I feel like there's a lot we just talked about. And do you feel like you have enough direction at this point?
I have enough direction. I've just been wondering if the utility committee is really the appropriate entity for some of this.
That's a good question. Because at one point we talked about doing two different groups or having A&R report back on some things and having the committee look at other things. We're just
Like prioritization funding,
right.
the streamlining the municipal permitting. I don't know if the study committee group is really that.
Maybe that is a report.
Maybe it's A&R in consultation with relevant stakeholders kind of thing.
Yeah, and I see we have a hand. Mr. Burke, go ahead.
Just speaking to, the multiple permits and trying to consolidate, Mike spoke about, there's different permits, multi-sector for industrial. There's federal permits, there's construction permits, it can get very complicated to combine permits. So I think, I don't think the utility study committee would be the place for that. I mean, we've explored some opportunities to do things like that. For example, an integrated permit for the city of Burlington for wastewater and stormwater. But it can get very complicated to have, for example, operational stormwater permits, 3-acre permits is a state permit. Our MS4 is a federal permit. They do get combined and wrapped into each other, but they often have different requirements. And particularly municipal roads general permit, we're talking about, very knowledgeable road foremen that manage roads very well, in many cases. But might not be geared towards implementing the practices that an engineer might design under the Vermont Stormwater Management Manual.
Yeah. Well, so just getting back to this point about some of these things are maybe not right for the study committee. It does seem like having a report from A&R would be useful. Let's start with that. For some of these other unrelated things and we can look at that and see if we want to change it from there.
Okay.
Okay, and I think we are going to have a bell here some any minute, so.
For love fest number 2.
Exactly.
It's not how ag natural resources bills have played out.
We're setting a new sense here.
I was a little taken aback.
Fair enough, fair enough.
See if we fall apart on the
And the pro tem stands up and it's like, at least one of you didn't take down your own bill.
That was a pretty fun.
That
day
was
on the floor.
amazing.
That was
Yeah.
amazing. Was it amazing?
See you there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
On his own bill.
That's what it's all about.
What's that? I am.
Okay, so with that, we will adjourn.